44% of farm workers in the United States today do not have green cards and are working illegally. More than 50% of the farm workers in New York State are working illegally. United States farms contribute over $1 trillion to the U.S. economy. You want to know the fastest way to a recession? And everybody eating canned tuna and Chips Ahoy cookies? Deport all the undocumented immigrants, including half the farm workers in the United States.
A new report by the American Immigration Council reveals the staggering costs of mass deportation in the United States. Deporting 1 million undocumented immigrants annually would cost the government at least $88 billion per year, totaling nearly $1 trillion in taxpayer expenses. The economic impact would be severe, with GDP potentially dropping 4.2% to 6.8%, comparable to the Great Recession. The operation would require hiring up to 409,000 new government employees and building numerous detention centers. Industries like construction, agriculture, and hospitality would lose millions of workers, potentially causing 88,000 American job losses per million deportations. Additionally, 8.5 million U.S. citizens in mixed-status households would face significant income loss.
Good morning, Africans. I hope you're doing fine where you are, and if you ain't doing fine, please do fine where you are. It's good to be fine, and it's never so good not to be so fine. Yeah, there's a lot happening in the world today, and I guess by now you've heard about Trump's mass deportation idea. You know, the whole idea of electing Trump back into power was to bring him to power so as to cleanse America. You know, those Americans really don't like people there. They think that people going there are robbing them of opportunities. They think that the government is giving priority to those people. They think that the government is using a lot of resources on these specified individuals. But I think that there is no any single country that does not have unregistered occupants. It does not have unregistered immigrants. You know, even the United States of America itself was built on the back of immigrants. So this idea of banishing people, wanting to chase people back away, removing the birthright as a way of citizenship is not a thing. Listen to what the black community and the entire world has to say about all these idea that Trump is having in his head.
Did you know Trump's proposing the biggest mass deportation plan in U.S. history? He wants to deport millions of undocumented immigrants. Hi, I'm Attorney Jay Francis. I'm a U.S. immigration lawyer based in Chicago, but serving all 50 states. I'm going to talk about his plan. The first, he plans to use a century-old law. It's called Alien Enemies Act, which allow him to deport people from enemy countries in wartime. His proposal aims to skip the current immigration court removal proceedings completely. He also wants to deploy military resources to the border using troops and military aircraft for transportation. He's even proposing to build huge detention centers to hold the people while they wait deportation. Plus, local police would work with the federal agents to make this happen. But there are a lot of issues. Economists warn this could devastate industry that rely on immigrant labor. Think agriculture, construction, and everywhere. Legal experts also say using military powers, especially wartime powers, for this raises serious ethical and legal concern. And what about the families, children, communities left behind and torn apart and living under fear? Is this plan even feasible? Or does it create more problems than it solves? Let me know what your thoughts.
If you're like these folks and you are all in on mass deportation, or even if you know someone who is, you are going to want to hear this. And this is important because just in September, a poll showed that 54% of Americans support mass deportation, including 25% of Democrats. But that's only until they've been told the consequences of that plan. And I am now well equipped to tell you those consequences because I just attended a fascinating webinar with the American Immigration Council in which they did a deep dive on how this policy will affect our economy. And it's called Mass Deportation, Devastating Cost to America, Its Budget, and Economy. Let's just go over the top lines. So first, how many people is Trump talking about deporting? Well, he says 10 million, he says 20 million, he says 30 million undocumented people. There's not actually that many undocumented people in the country. The study uses a very research-based number, 13.3 million. This number doesn't include people who came to the U.S. through parole programs. They are here legally. Trump still wants to deport them as well. And also, Trump wants to deport now naturalized citizens as well. This is something called remigration. You should Google it. But again, this study just looks at undocumented people, 13.3 million of them. Now, the first thing to know is that we have no system in place for going out and rounding up all of those people. That doesn't exist. ICE doesn't do that. They find undocumented people when they come into the law enforcement system. So that system would need to be created out of whole cloth. So going into communities and arresting people turns out to be extremely expensive. ICE would need to hire about 31,000 more agents, and this part, just the arresting, would cost about $7 billion a year. So next is the cost of actually detaining these people, because we only right now have the capacity to detain about 40,000 undocumented people at a time. So what Trump wants to do would require detaining about 1 million people at a time, and that would require them to build massive tent structures down by the border. Those are incredibly expensive to build. Then there's the cost of legal proceedings, because before someone can be deported, there has to be a removal order. That's a court case. That's the law. There are already 3.7 million cases pending in immigration court, so you would have to hire new ICE prosecutors, new courtrooms, new staff, new judges. Then there is the cost of removal itself, and this is setting aside the logistical difficulties that half of the countries these people come from will not take them back. So we have to find third countries that will take them. Hugely difficult. Then the cost. So the ICE director in a hearing last year said that one single flight hour of an ICE deportation flight costs $17,000. So multiply that by these millions of people. They're saying the removal process, the average flight cost, ground transportation, all that, $21 billion to remove 1 million immigrants annually. They also said to bear in mind that right now there is a plane shortage, there is a pilot shortage. We have never in the history of our country deported more than 230,000 people in a year, ever. But Trump is saying that we're going to do 10 million in a year. It is logistically impossible. For all the reasons I've just stated, it cannot actually happen. But let's say that it could. These people decided to analyze what would that cost. Let's say you could do it. And they found it would cost $350 billion just for the deportation, not its impact on the economy. So then they analyzed it the other way. Let's say they do 1 million people a year. How much is that going to cost? Well, it turns out that is 3 times as expensive. Now, again, this is much more likely the way they'd have to do it. If we did it that way, how much would it cost? $967.9 billion, almost $1 trillion, and that's if inflation stays at 2.9%, which if Trump is elected, it won't. And of course, there are the costs to the morale and the psyche of the country, the mass trauma that will be caused by the family separations. Law enforcement, military, National Guard, moving through cities, going into households, ripping apart, because remember, many of these families are mixed, right? Undocumented people live with citizens. Their children are citizens. So we're talking mass family separation, and also our law enforcement and our military being focused not on their jobs, but on this massive deportation. Now let's look at what it will do to our economy. Our GDP would shrink by between 1.1 and 2.2 trillion dollars. That's between 4 and 6% shrinkage in our GDP. 4.3% shrinkage was what we had during the Great Recession. So we're looking at a recession. Tax revenues will fall 29 billion in the states and 46 billion federal taxes gone. Undocumented immigrants also contribute $22.6 billion to Social Security and $5.7 billion to Medicare. All that money gone. And think about this. Construction and agriculture are both going to lose 1 in 8 workers. Think about what that's going to do to housing prices and food prices. Hospitality is going to lose 1 in 14 workers. Think about what that's going to do to tourism. The restaurant industry will be gutted, and childcare, forget it. Now, the last thing I'll tell you is they also looked at what would happen if you did the opposite of Trump's plan. Putting undocumented immigrants on a pathway to citizenship, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do, would increase U.S. GDP by $1.7 trillion over 10 years. It would raise wages for all Americans, and it would create hundreds of thousands of new jobs. Do you see why Trump's plan is not only impracticable, but stupid? So what these signs really should say, tank our economy now, because that's what they mean. Not so psyched about waving that sign? Good. Then for God's sake, don't vote for it.
So our grandpa, to-be President Donald Trump, is saying that he's going to make the biggest deportation in the history of America. I think this is the biggest deportation in the history of the whole world. You know, considering the size of the United States of America and considering how people have always perceived it over the years, people perceive the United States of America as the country of opportunity. Long before I was born, my parents saw it as a land of opportunity. My grandparents saw it as that. So how many people do you think have gone to the U.S.? The U.S. is a multiracial country. We have Indians, Chinese, Red Indians, Europeans, African Americans over there. But now the true inhabitants of that place are the ones who should take a voice. But the Constitution does not allow them to make a voice on that. You know, those people you see are called Indians, the Mexicans, the Guatemalans, the people from the Central America. Those people are just, you know, they are sorry and they don't have a means of living. Coming to the U.S. is where they'll find an opportunity to find food for their children to eat, you know. Sometimes I say that if you're faced with 2 choices, and the choices are right and kind, you normally say choose the kind path. You don't always have to be right every now and then. Some people may say that you are easygoing, but in the back of your mind, you know it's kindness which is operating, and it rewards in the end. Also, economists in the United States of America are discussing that deportation will cost a lot to the government. You know, taxpayers' money, a lot of it will go to deporting these people. If I'm not wrong, around $10 billion will be used annually to deport immigrants. That is 1 million immigrants per year. 10 billion US dollars, I think 8 or 10. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that could be used in some other activities. One thing I tend to agree with Trump is where these refugees, these people who are to be deported, are bringing problems to the country. If they are being a security threat, that is the only thing that, according to me, I think should push towards such extreme measures, because this is an extreme measure. Trump is even planning to create something like a prison to hold these refugees so that they don't go anywhere. They just wait for their turn to be deported. And also you can be deported to a country that is not of your own, a country that is not your origin. Trump is also going to remove the birthright law of becoming a citizen. You know, we have various ways of becoming a citizen: through birth, through naturalization, through marriage, through certification, through registration. We have so many of these methods. But he's seen that many immigrants are coming and they are giving birth in the United States of America, which is making a huge population of immigrants. And he believes and he perceives that these immigrants are stealing opportunities and resources that is meant to be used for the Americans who are the citizens. You get me? Because they even are not the original inhabitants. If you come to look at it, this is not something which is new. You know, someone once said that the wisest man in the whole world who once lived, the wisest man, not God, Christ was way wiser than him. So Solomon said that there is nothing new under the sun. What is happening today happened during the biblical times. Remember what Pharaoh did to Moses. He killed boy children. He didn't want the population to grow. During the time of Jesus, boy children were killed. It's something that has always happened. The Arabs, they castrated African males so the population would not increase. So because we are living in the modern times, Trump does not have to make such extreme choices that those rulers of the past were making. The only thing he can do is to remove that thing which allows these children to become citizens. He is planning to remove citizenship by birth. This is going to destabilize a lot of families. This is going to destabilize a lot of relationships, marriages. A lot of things is going to break up. So going back to what I saw the lawyer said, I think I've shown you the video. The lawyer is trying to show us the negative side to this. Actually, people are only seeing the negative side. Only the Americans can see the positive side. And it is said that 54% of Americans have voted yes for the mass deportation. That's more than half. That's the majority. 54% have voted yes. Of these, 25% are Democrats, have voted also yes. So it's a thing which is serious. Those people who are always wanting to rush to United States of America. Today is US, tomorrow might be Canada, another day might be China or Japan. You stay back home, Stay back home. I think home is the best place for you. You can never get deported at your own home. You get the full respect you need. Yeah. This is the end of the video. This is EFK original documentary, and this is what I want you to do. Kindly subscribe to the channel and support us on Patreon. We shall surely appreciate for your support, and see you in the next one. Yeah. Remember to stay black, stay happy.